Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, policing the police. Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller wants to yank the troubled citizen oversight of APD out from under the City Council after months of delays.
It ultimately is the City Council's role to hold the administration accountable. That's why we have two branches of government.
And an author and historian looks back at the history of Blackdom, a freedom colony founded in southern New Mexico at the turn of the 20th century, and what it means today. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm senior producer Lou DeVizio. Since forming in 2020, the nonprofit group Free Flow New Mexico has distributed monthly menstrual products at no cost in an attempt to decrease period poverty in northern New Mexico. This year, Free Flow installed 3 period pods in Santa Fe. They're self-serve kiosks with period products available 24 hours a day. In the second half of today's show, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez speaks to the director of the organization about the project and why free access to those products is so important. Then, in about a half hour, Dr. Timothy Nelson stops by the studio to discuss his new book, Blackdom, New Mexico, The Significance of the Afro-Frontier, 1900 to 1930. Correspondent Russell Contreras asks Dr. Nelson about the Freedom Colony's origins and how those black settlers sought to achieve frontier independence. Before that, in just about 15 minutes, the former director of the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission, Norman Gaume, drops in, as he's done for the last decade, to update us on New Mexico's water problems and potential solutions. Gaume, now the president of New Mexico Water Advocates, talks with Our Land's Laura Paskus about the 2023 Water Security Planning Act and what actions the state should take now to protect our communities. But first, we zoom in on Mayor Tim Keller's idea to take oversight of Albuquerque's citizen police review systems away from City Council and hand part of it to the city's Inspector General, and the rest to himself. The mayor cites staffing woes, a lack of training for police oversight board members, and other problems to justify his proposal. And he believes the move would spell the long-awaited end of a decade-long federal consent decree that mandated sweeping reforms at the state's largest law enforcement agency. But outgoing council president Pat Davis says the mayor's idea is misguided and would kill what's left of public trust in truly independent oversight of APD. Davis sat for an interview with executive producer Jeff Proctor to explain why he thinks City Council should remain in charge.
Pat Davis, welcome back to New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks, Jeff.
We'll get to Mayor Keller's proposal to remove the Civilian Police Oversight Agency and the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board from under the City Council in a moment. Those are some seriously clunky proper nouns.
Yeah.
I would like to begin, however, by asking sort of a bigger question. Why is citizen police oversight important, especially for a department like APD?
Well, remember that at the end of the day, sort of that policing function is kind of the most important and maybe the biggest extension of the government's power over people, right? We have the ability to take away a person's life if we determine, that police officer determines at that moment that they've committed something that is danger to other people, right? There's no second chance on that decision. And quite frankly, departments like APDs have had a really bad history for a really long time of ignoring the constitutional requirements to be sure that we're getting ahead of that, we're intervening, we're thinking about use of force in a way that makes it the last resort, not the first. And so it's no history. APD has not done this well, not under this mayor, not under the last 3 or 4 mayors, not under a number of police union members. Its culture over the last few decades, since the 80s at least, has drawn serious questions from the community and eroded our public trust. And so the way you get that back is to give civilians the oversight of the agency to be sure that civilians are receiving the type of police service that they deserve, want, and is constitutional. We haven't done that for about 40 years, and we're trying to fix that.
So empowering people who live here to have a say in the way they're policed is sort of what I'm hearing you say. And obviously that's an incredibly important function. Here in Albuquerque, the citizen police oversight system is frankly a hot mess. The mayor sent you a letter last week, and I would like to go through some of the undisputed facts, the parade of horribles, if you will, that are laid out. Let's start with this. 2 of 5 seats on that board are currently filled. The board hasn't even met since January. let alone discussed any sort of an officer misconduct case, which is its function. The oversight agency doesn't have a permanent leader, and the city council has yet to hire the contractor who is responsible for hiring that permanent leader. Right. Councilor Davis, how can any of that, let alone all of that, be true in a city where the police shoot more people than almost anywhere else in the country?
Well, this gets back to our history of police oversight, civilian police oversight in the city. This is, by the way you count it, the third or fourth time the city council and the mayor have tried to come up with a structure that works. As the president of the city council, I take responsibility for saying that I agree with the big principle that the city council has not been fast enough to move those new pieces along. But we have to remember that the first CPOA, the one that was under the initial version of this after the CASA was implemented, after the Police Oversight Commission, the old version, it really didn't work, right? After 3 or 4 years, there was a rework that Councilor Winter and I worked on to really try to narrow the scope, give them more insight into APD big picture policy and less focus on individual investigations. That got to be ungovernable, and we went through 4 directors basically in a year. And so the city council undertook a year-long process to review that whole thing. We looked at other cities on the recommendation of DOJ, places that worked, places that didn't, and we restructured that last January. So that new CPOA, the Oversight Advisory Board legislation passed. The mayor didn't act on it, and so it went into effect in February. That gave us this past February, and we said it's going to take us a year to do this the right way. And so our staff has been working with APD and DOJ and other communities who've done this a little further ahead of us to look at what that looks like. The new advisory board is not designed to do individual investigations because the idea is individual citizens probably don't have the expertise individually to do that investigation, and so we gave them professional investigators who have experience training, and this group will provide oversight of those investigators, kind of like the internal affairs department of the police department that sits outside of it, just like the DOJ had done.
So this all lives under the city council, at least in the current iteration. Is this just one of those this takes time things, or have there been individual sort of points of failure or challenges that have come up in the process of trying to get this right?
There is a consistent challenge that we continue to come by. We don't have enough people who have applied to do on this board, and part of that is the history. What we know is that the last iteration of the Police Oversight Board, when they were overseeing investigations and policy and all those things, some of those volunteer members were working 40 hours a week as volunteers just to go to all the meetings and just to read all the policies and keep up with everything, and it was just too much. And so we restructured that, but we said it's going to take a year. And here's what I told the mayor, and here's what we wrote back to the mayor last week. We are on track to do that. We actually appointed 3 members to that board. We were on track to get to a quorum. One of them resigned after determining that they were not going to be able to perform that duty. We've interviewed 11 other candidates have been interviewed and qualified. They're scheduled
for the board.
For the board itself. They're scheduled to be introduced at the city council meeting on the 20th, which allows us to act on them at the first meeting in December. So we're on track to have a quorum of that board ready to go by the end of the year as promised. We have a RFP out for that contract monitor to help us do that. We determined that we needed to know who the board members were going to be and be sure they understood the rules before we had a monitor to sit there and wait. We didn't have anything for them to do until we have a board. So we're on track to appoint that person in December and then hire a director. But that doesn't mean stuff's not happening. We have an acting director, we have investigators, they have been producing reports and data, and so we're seeing those and they're available. But we're at the end of that year of rebuilding. We want to hand the new city council next year a fully functioning board under this new premise and model so that they can be in the oversight role and not in the rebuilding role that I've been in for the last 8 years.
Okay. You alluded a moment ago to the history of attempts at citizen police oversight in the city of Albuquerque. Ostensibly, that began back in the mid-90s. It's never worked. I don't think there's any objective measure that would say we've ever had a system in place that Albuquerque trusted. I think it's worth noting that the framework for the current system was sort of birthed in 2014, and that was sort of alongside the Justice Department's findings of use of excessive force and failed leadership at APD and City Hall. You did sort of grab a piece out of my hippocampus called the Police Oversight Commission. I want to talk a little bit about how that worked. So that was the old system prior to 2014, the POC. Right. The independent review officer investigated the excessive force cases and officer misconduct cases under that scheme. All of that lived under the administration. That's right. One of those investigators, a guy named Jay Rowland, produced an incredibly scathing report about problems in the APD evidence room. Not long after that thing published, Jay was never heard from again. So the task force that created the new system, one thing that was really important to them, and I wrote a lot about this at the time, was making sure that the system was removed from under the administration. They placed it under the council very intentionally. Did they get that part right?
100%. The one thing we know is that in our history in the past, as police oversight has been, as you mentioned, and as you wrote about decades ago, that has been under the administration. It's given them the ability. And here's what really didn't work. When we go back and look at that old Walker Luna report, right? This is the city council that was Alan Armijo and Sam Bregman did their own mini study about what to do that produced the Police Oversight Commission and then became the CPOA. What they found was that independent review officer, when they report to the mayor, for example, suddenly the mayor who negotiates union contracts negotiated away the ability of the independent review officer to look at some of the more serious allegations or to give the public a long-form view of officer misconduct. And so they had to look at Officer Jeff's single incident and not the 7 things in a row that had led up to that had also been found to be unconstitutional or outside of policy.
No pattern inquiries.
Yeah, that's a great term for that, right? And so what really happened was once the mayor both has control over the police department and the oversight, and this is not the current mayor, it's any mayor, you run into the problem that you mentioned, which is what if they decide I'm not going to allow you to investigate that, or worse, what if I contractually remove your authority to do that with the police union in negotiations, both of which happened in the former model. Every city that's gotten this right or gotten this better than us ensures that they're wholly independent. And that's part of the argument I think the mayor's trying to make about moving them to Inspector General. At least in the city, that is a quasi-independent agency with clearly not always a little adversarial with the mayor and the city council. And so if you want a bulldog agency to sort of take on this role, like the Inspector General is not a bad one, but there are some flaws there too. But absolutely, independence is important. And don't forget, it ultimately is the city council's role to hold the administration accountable. That's why we have 2 branches of government. And so that's part of their role for oversight, is to be sure. If we need an independent group of community people with certain expertise to help us with that, we should implement that. And that's really how we should look at this. It is ultimately the city council responsible, but they're asking for experts to help.
Gotcha. And so that people don't forget that city government has gotten so large now. Yeah. You mentioned holding the administration accountable. APD is the administration. The administration is APD. I just want to make sure that that gets said, because sometimes people view that as a separate set of entities.
Well,
right?
And people come to city council meetings asking us to take, fire this police officer because of what I read in the Albuquerque Journal or a newspaper or on TV. Remember that city councilors aren't allowed to get involved in personnel decisions. In many cases, we're not even allowed to know what type of discipline was imposed on a city employee in a specific case, other than employees who committed this infraction have had these discipline imposed. And so it really is important that somebody with oversight authority be able to look, as you mentioned, in that long form view, but also in a big picture state. How many people did we shoot last year? What were the circumstances for that? I don't think, as the former police officer myself, and there are a couple of us on the city council, I don't think that we have the expertise to look at all of those cases and do that. But we need somebody who does, and that should inform the city council.
Gotcha. So the mayor wants to take the CPOA piece and place that under the Inspector General, as you just mentioned. He wants to take vetting responsibility for board members on the civilian board and essentially handle that himself. Can he just do that with the stroke of a pen?
Oh, good for the city that he can't just do that. But I think what he's doing is starting a conversation, and here's where I think it makes sense. Remember that we're 95% compliant with where we started with DOJ, according to their own monitors. Meaning we've gotten 95% of the policy right, and we're at about 70, 80%, depending on the section, in terms of implementing it. Meaning that we're doing it the right way, we're recognizing our failures and correcting them. It doesn't mean we have to be 100%. It means we have to correct the problems, and
we have a system in place to self-monitor. Right?
It's a feedback loop, right? When something goes wrong, we fix it and we continue to improve. That's good news. The independent oversight has been a problem in every city that has had these issues, in part because citizens don't all agree on what it means to have a police department that's servicing them in the way they want to see. But ultimately, having the mayor make the decision about who gets to decide whether that's right or wrong, not just to this mayor, but any, is problematic. And we've seen that in other places. We look at what happened with the Oñate statue and the mayor's fight with the museum board, whether their recommendation to remove or return the statue, for example, aligned with their agenda, and they changed out some members of that board at that time. These are some big community conversations, but to your point, we have a history when mayors get to decide who gets to be in charge of oversight and who gets to be in charge of taking action and discipline. Those things eventually sort of meld into one and really can just ignore big problems, and that's how we got here.
So you mentioned the DOJ consent decree. The mayor has been very, very clear that he would like to end federal oversight of our police department as quickly as possible.
Yes.
He is running for a third term next year. Being able to end the consent decree would obviously look very nice in a campaign ad. From reading the letter that he sent to the council, he's framing this as a way to end the consent decree. Do you view this as political? Have you spoken to the mayor? What do you see as his motivation here?
The mayor and I talk every couple of weeks on purpose in person, and we talked about this before he sent his letter, and I shared it with other councilors, but I think it's sort of dead on arrival for the idea that we would give this to the Inspector General. I'll be done with my term in another couple of weeks, and so it'll ultimately be up to the next council if the mayor can wrangle those votes. But what I know is that the administration and the community, including all the stakeholders in the APD Forward process, worked with us for a year to come up with this new process, to see how this is going to work, to have professional trained investigators, to have an independent monitor in the city council, and to have an advisory board of citizens who can look at the big picture and tell us what's working and what's not. Remember, when this CASA's gone, and I think we should celebrate the fact that we've got, not that they're gone, like I don't like the frame that we're getting really from APOA that says our job is to get them gone. No, our job is to have a constitutional policing agency that doesn't violate people's rights. Mm-hmm. And so when we can prove we do that, we deserve to not have mom and dad looking over our shoulder. But we have to put some of these reform pieces in legislation so that when counselors like me or others are gone, we don't lose that institutional knowledge. That's what this is about. What concerns us is putting the CPOA under the Inspector General or anywhere else where the agenda could get lost. At the very least, we have a group of citizens who can come to the city council meeting and say, we work for you, they're not giving us what we need your attention. When those folks when they report to this APD and they all report to the same people, there's nobody to raise that. There's no whistleblower anymore, and that's what got APD in trouble in the first place.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you think this is dead on arrival with this particular council.
This provision. Anyway.
This provision, right? So what I want to ask, obviously you're leaving the council, as you just mentioned, in a few weeks, so I'm not going to ask you to prognosticate about what the next council might do, but what is your hope, leaving the council, for what Burqueños should expect from citizen police oversight going forward? You got about a minute.
Really quickly, what we know now is that it was asking too much to ask individual citizens to volunteer 40 or 50 hours a week to look at individual cases of police misconduct, and their perceptions of that were vastly different, and often they didn't have the experience to apply a constitutional lens that DOJ would apply to the officer were they prosecuted, for example. And so what we've asked is that new board is going to give us big picture stuff. They're going to monitor the provisions of the CASA that we put in law, so when CASA's not here, we still have something to hold them to. They're going to tell us how many officers we have working, how many of them committed use of force used force, and how many of those were constitutional, and how the department is doing. This is the oversight agency. From a professional level, these are the independent investigators are going to be the cops watching the cops, right? They're experienced law enforcement folks applying this standard to be sure that APD systems work. It's the EFIT system. It's the external force review system that DOJ applied to APD when they tried to do their own internal affairs and failed. We're codifying those processes to be sure they're there beyond any of us, and we're going to have that. So what people should expect is more data about how APD reacts and how many uses of force they use on a regular basis, because we have an outside agency and we're not relying on APD to do their own reporting. And they're going to see more investigations and more transparency when APD doesn't close that feedback loop. I think you're going to see fewer and fewer lists of just officer did a bad thing and APD did the right thing. That's not something that generally the public is going to get involved in because that's working. But what you should see is the city council is going to be out of the rebuilding mode and into the compliance mode, and somebody's got to do that. And so keeping that adversarial relationship between the mayor and the council, if everything's working great, they should be focused on other things. But when something falls apart again, it's going to be incumbent on the new city council to raise that flag and use their oversight authority. And I'll be the first to say that the city council hasn't done a good enough job in oversight in other areas over the last few years, particularly on some of the big ticket stuff, and they're going to have to be held accountable to do it now.
That was a long minute. Pat Davis, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Jeff.
For the most part, in Blackdom, they were able to generate generational wealth. The problem came when they were in the cities, like in Roswell, for example. When Blackdom children, when they mostly migrated out of Blackdom and into Roswell, for example, they went to the high school and were not able to get their diplomas, even though they completed all of their credits, for example. So that's where the pressure kind of built up, because part of Blackdom was to have a ranch in Blackdom, but also maintain yourselves in the cities.
That interview from Russell with Dr. Timothy Nelson is coming up in about 15 minutes. And before we move on to our next story, we want to share some of the Keller administration's response to our questions about citizen police oversight. The mayor's spokesperson says his letter to the council was merely a suggestion to, quote, prod, unquote, councilors. Here's part of the statement, quote, APD is almost done with the consent decree, and one of the only items left is the council's CPOA work, so we all just need to get off the dime and see reform through for our community, end quote. You can read the mayor's full response on our website and in this week's New Mexico in Focus newsletter. Now we turn to former New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission Director Norman Gaum, who's back on the show to talk about water planning in the state. Over the past decade, Gaum has worked from outside government, urging lawmakers to fund New Mexico's water agencies and to protect the state's waters. These days, he's president of the group New Mexico Water Advocates, and he talks with Our Land senior producer Laura Paskus about the 2023 Water Security Planning Act, some of the serious problems around the state, and the need for community-driven solutions.
Norm Gaum, welcome back to New Mexico in Focus.
I'm glad to be here, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So a few months ago, we had Interstate Stream Commission Director Hannah Risley White on the show, and we talked a bit about water planning in New Mexico. I wanted to ask you, how do you feel water planning in New Mexico is going?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think the legislation that passed in 2023, and it passed without a single no vote, not in committee, not on either floor, signed by the governor. It was a state engineer bill, so the agencies support it. It has such potential for New Mexico, but it's complex, and the Interstate Stream Commission and the State Engineer Office are just buried in work. Mm-hmm. They don't have the capacity that we really need them to have, and that's because the legislature has, and the governors, past governors, have actually cut their staff, you know, in this age where we're experiencing water scarcity, we need planning. So the good news is we have a great new law that could be a tipping point, a pivot point, you know, from which progress accelerates. The realities are that it's going to be slow getting off the ground because of capacity limitations, both at the state level and in the regions that have to do the planning.
Yeah, so despite an enormous budget surplus that everybody likes to talk about, are we funding water planning and water agencies?
No, the answer is absolutely not.
I've heard you talk about ongoing water governance issues that require immediate attention or action. What are some of those?
Well, the Ogallala Aquifer, the communities Clovis, Portales, Texaco. I understand Texaco and Portales literally ran out of water this summer. Their wells ran dry. They're getting trickles out of their showers. We've known about that problem for decades in this state, and we have let the status quo go until now we literally have more wells being drilled. It's a race to the very bottom of the aquifer. And I'm talking about communities that will have no drinking water if we don't change what we're doing now. In the Middle Rio Grande, we have big problems, but they're manageable. But as long as we're not attempting to manage them holistically, they're not going to be managed, because no one entity has the formula to fix things. International scholars who met at UNM in June concluded that water is a community problem. Research into problems and solutions don't reach the people. They don't reach the legislature. A community problem like water can only be solved can only be addressed through community-driven solutions. That's what planning is all about. It's coming up with community-driven solutions, and that's what our new law provides for. And the new solutions can't depend just on the state or just on the water authority or the conservancy district, because all of those institutions in the Middle Valley have their own missions, and their missions are to take care of their people, not to take care of the water system and the water supply. And so the pieces don't add up to a whole. What the Act says is we have to come together, we have to collaborate, and we have to find solutions to our problems. And to me, it doesn't do any good to talk about the specific problems right now, because that's just going to turn people off. What we have to do is what the Water Security Planning Act tells us to do, which is to self-organize, a collaborative effort where we can work together and find agreed solutions to our problems. And it's not going to be easy. We've got to get started.
There are these problems statewide and issues statewide, but just looking at the Middle Rio Grande Valley, I'm curious what you think. Are we living within our water budget? Are we living within our water budget?
The simple answer is no. The trend has been really negative, just down, down, down for the last decade. Basically, a lot of our water went away, but our uses remained the same. What we did is we transferred from the river, which we were beginning to depend on for drinking water in Albuquerque, back to groundwater. And guess what? The groundwater, remember, it was rising. It's started to fall again. But the good news is that we have the ingredients for solution. We in the Middle Valley have over half of the state's people. We have half the state's economy, the diversified economy. We have a thin slice of water to support all of that. We have to figure out how to manage that thin slice by agreement so that it meets our needs. It may not meet all of our wants, but there's enough water to meet our needs.
So looking back, you were the Interstate Stream Commission director from 1997 to 2002. Looking back now, what do you wish that maybe you had done differently then?
You know, I have close colleagues that I depend a lot on, that counsel me that my constant wishing the past should have been different is really not productive. It really doesn't change things. What we have to focus on the future. What do I wish I had done differently? Well, when I was appointed Interstate Stream Commission director, the crisis of the moment in water was compliance with the Pecos River Compact. And through a collaborative process involving the stakeholders, we found an agreed solution. We negotiated it. Everybody agreed. It was passed into law by the legislature in the very next session of the legislature. And you know what? Compact compliance on the Pecos has not been a problem since. And it was a crisis every year before that. You know, going back to 1987 when we were served with a decree to never again owe water to Texas. I said at the time that I'm happy to work on this crisis, but the lower Rio Grande is more important. And the middle Rio Grande is most important at all. Now, I didn't have the bandwidth or time, or my agency didn't have the resources to deal with those issues, the Interstate Stream Commission. They have more resources now, but not enough. So I wish, if anything, what we had done was to set the stage for concentrated attention on the lower Rio Grande and the middle Rio Grande. We prepared a plan. Some of that got into the plan, but guess what? The plans were never funded to be implemented. Now, the Pecos River Plan, that was a crisis. It was fully funded by the state. It was implemented. It was a success.
Right.
We need to replicate that in the lower Rio Grande. We most especially need to replicate it here in the middle Rio Grande.
So one of the things that I think about sometimes is people who work in water in New Mexico, or probably anywhere, whether they're in federal or state agencies, like, they genuinely care about water. They're not in it for any other reason except that they care about these issues. But I also feel like a lot of people who work in water in New Mexico know that our problems are far bigger than we publicly acknowledge. And certainly that legislators acknowledge. I'm curious what you might urge these types of employees to consider or to think about in their daily work and in their work for the state.
That's an excellent question, Laura. When I arrived at the ISC, I was told that we shouldn't be too frank about problems when we're talking about problems, because that would be an admission that would be used against us. So the theory was to even talk about a problem was an admission. Right now, there are people in the Office of the State Engineer that are in charge of these big data sets. They can't help what the people who came before them did, but those data sets are in lousy condition and they need to be cleaned up. People need to say that. One of the keys on the Pecos River to our solution was speaking what we called then and what I call now the plain truths. You know, the plain truths in Albuquerque in the 1990s were the aquifer's not working the way we think it should, what's going on, and then later, we can't pump the groundwater as our only means of surface supply because the river water is not making into it. That's a plain truth. The plain truth in the middle Rio Grande is we're using more water than we are entitled to. The plain truth in the middle Rio Grande is that nobody is protecting the volume of water that remains in the aquifer. The aquifer is not a protected water supply source in the state except through permits and things that only peripherally get to the problem, and those permits are never revisited. You know, so we have to change our ways dramatically. And the only way we do that is to talk about the problems. Admission or not, we can't solve a problem unless we can name it. Name the problems, talk about them, seek solutions.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. On our website, we'll have resources and information on how people can become involved in water planning. So thank you.
Laura, you do a real public service in New Mexico. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Especially since COVID, the library sort of fell into this role of being a community center. Not that we always kind of were, but we were doing COVID tests, we were helping people get their vaccinations, and we kind of switched our model to where we were looking at what could help the people of Santa Fe the most. And so whether that was access to library materials, information, or in this case, period products, we want to be able to ensure that every person in Santa Fe has access to what they need to be successful, whatever that looks like.
Thanks again to Laura and former New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission Director Norman Gaum. And like Laura said, you can find water resources online. Just go to nmpbs.org, click on New Mexico in Focus, and find the Our Land page. Founded at the turn of the 20th century, Blackton was a freedom colony in southern New Mexico formed by black settlers hoping to escape the Jim Crow South. This week on the show, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Russell Contreras sits down with Dr. Timothy Nelson to talk about his new book, Blackdom, New Mexico, The Significance of the Afro-Frontier, which explains how the colony's goals grew and shifted between 1900 and 1930. Before we air the interview, a brief disclaimer: Dr. Nelson uses a racial slur while recounting a headline in a Texas newspaper announcing the creation of Blackdom. We felt it was important for you to see Dr. Nelson fully describing the way Blackdom was received at the time. Here's Russell.
Dr. Timothy Nelson, thank you for joining us here at New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on your new book, Blackdom, New Mexico, The Significance of the Afro-Frontier, 1900 to 1930. First off, Blackdom was a town in what people say the middle of nowhere, settled by black people. What was Blackdom and who settled there?
First, we have to start with Blackdom was a real place because my brother thought I made that up. But Blackdom was this, 1800s notion of promised land at first. And then it transitioned into an investment vehicle. It was always an investment vehicle where black ambitions are nurtured and circulated amongst each other. So it was a promised land, but it was also a place where black people can live out their striving.
Who settled there and where did they come from?
Settling was a diversity of people. First, there was the population who was born under the institutions of slavery out of the South, Texas, Midwest. And then you had a few cohorts come through. Some were the ultra literate black folks who were traveling from New York to California and stopped in Blackdom because of what they had heard about it in the Crisis magazine or in the black press. You had a lot of women, also including women who were on the homesteads themselves as well. So there was a diverse population of black folks.
Now, in the early 1900s, we're just one generation removed from enslavement. And at this time, black people had some options to migrate to various places. Why did some choose Blackdom?
Mostly because it was a territory. So in a territory, the normal Jim Crow laws don't necessarily apply in the same way. So crossing over from a Texas, for example, into New Mexico was generally considered Jim Crow free, but in the local folklore or agreements, gentlemen agreements, the Pecos River was the end of the Jim Crow line, and I can go through that a little bit later too. But so Blackdom is located 5 miles west of the Pecos, and so it's the place where you end up with people who are not just black, for example, but people who cannot claim whiteness.
Mm. And where was it located in terms of modern day towns?
Modern day, okay, we'll talk about modern day. Dexter, New Mexico is directly east 5 miles. North, you have 20 miles north is Roswell, 20 miles south is Artesia, 80 miles, 60 miles is Carlsbad. So basically that 285 line from Roswell into Carlsbad.
You mentioned in the book that this was the coming together of black Americans from other cities across the country, but there's also another encounter of black people from Latin America, or a place that used to be part of Mexico. Who were these people and how did they form Blackdom?
How much time do we have? When we're talking about Blackdom, I contextualize it as Mexico's northern frontier. And so what you end up with are people who are black indigenous, black Mexicanos. It's just it's an intersection of blackness happening in Blackdom, including some Irish immigrants who are also integrated into the family. So what directly do you want me to answer about the population?
When they came together, was there an encounter of some sort? Did they see each other as one, or were there cultural differences?
Generally, they came together because of their consciousness. One of the things was church was very important. And then you had a military background. So if you have this in your background or in your family, it ends up being part of how we begin communing. And then you have the Black Freemasons. So within those institutions, you have a lot of community help, apprenticeships, when people come in and it's their first time and they want to learn how to farm, for example. So it's a community of people who are nurturing the different identities that are going on there. And it's mostly around the consciousness that they maintain within.
You mentioned lack of Jim Crow laws, de facto, but there's also lack of infrastructure, a lot of lack of water. What was life like in Blackdom when it first started?
A lot of times people talk about droughts because that is the common folklore about Blackdom. I just went there last week and there is water there now. Let's say 100 years ago there were droughts. There were other ways to maintain your homestead besides simply farming, for example. So you can invest in a desert homestead by going into Roswell or into Artesia and working as a maid, a cook, and a porter. Well, you appear in those spaces as the help, but when you come back to Blackdom, you're the landowner, you're the peace officer, you're the court. So yeah. The farming did work by statehood, 1912. You had the Negro Thanksgiving, for example, and it was this big banquet where you had a Toastmaster who was Frank Boyer, and all of the food was provided by Blackdom Farms. So they were able to provide everyone with a regenerative agricultural society, but everyone weren't able to benefit from that.
You mentioned that this was, in many ways, crafted as a Black utopia. Mm-hmm. There was a church, there were businesses, general stores, and all that. What were they seeking in creating this Black utopia? What was on their mind?
Again, the diversity amongst them was this notion of frontier sovereignty. But the problem with sovereignty is everyone gets to decide how they're going to live out that particular sovereignty. So, for example, I'll give you an example. As they started, it was a regenerative agricultural society, so built around church and God and seed time and harvest. But once oil was found in New Mexico about 1909-ish, and commercial wells around 1922, Blackdomites started seeing their land or their space as a place of extraction. So that kind of changed what their motivations were amongst the different people. So as they gathered their thoughts, they maintained the land, but the idea of living as a township or with the relationships, that changed over time. So yeah, that's not exactly a direct answer, but it ebbed and flowed depending on what the circumstances were.
Now we know when Black people move into neighborhoods, they attract attention.
A little bit.
And when they move into the middle of nowhere, they can also attract attention, like with Blackdom. What was the reaction to surrounding towns, to Black settlers coming from all over the country to this one spot in New Mexico? How did they react?
Bryan, Texas, an article I'll never forget. New Mexico to have nigger town. That was the reception. However, but that was Bryan, Texas. So that ad went for that population in that municipality, but when you cross over the Pecos, you can have all those thoughts you want. It's a southern oasis in Roswell and Artesia. However, the gentleman rules apply. So for the most part in Blackdom, they were able to generate generational wealth. The problem came when they were in the cities, like in Roswell, for example. When Blackdom children, when they mostly migrated out of Blackdom and into Roswell, for example, they went to the high school and were not able to get their diplomas, even though they completed all of their credits, for example. So that's where the pressure kind of built up, because part of Blackdom was to have a ranch in Blackdom, but also maintain yourselves in the cities.
So some of formerly enslaved people, or the descendants of enslaved people, moved to Blackdom. Mm-hmm. Did some of the former Confederates move to the surrounding towns? What happened there?
Oh yeah. That's what I mean by a southern oasis. Part of the homestead situation was you weren't allowed to own homestead land if you had taken up arms against the United States. And so there were other ways that Confederates were able to get land. For example, the trains came in. Well, the trains come in, they get all kind, they get land in various different ways, and some are more nefarious than others. And so Confederates were able to get land by buying it and selling it from people who had originally homesteaded. Nimmie, for example, I believe Hagerman was one of the ones who donated 40 acres in order for the Goss Institute, which was named for a Confederate at first, before it became Nimmie. That was a part of how they got land, trading land from one to another, or I think it's called third-party purchasing is how that was. So when they gathered that, they created that Southern oasis, and black people a lot of times use it to their advantage. For example, like I said, they would go in and there would be maids for people from Kentucky who were Confederate leaning, but then they would go ahead and have their own consciousness and space to deal as black people in blackness.
And ultimately, why did people leave Blackdom by 1930s?
By 1929, the bus for everybody was a bus for Blackdom. So the leaving was gradual because the land was still there. There was never a point where they just simply sold off their land and then left. What happened was, because they were already leasing the land by 1919, and after 1919, the landmass grew exponentially, they were already leasing it and living in Roswell, Albuquerque, Tucson, Detroit, Atlanta, wherever they moved to, they were still able to receive their royalties. So 1929 was when it was, or 30s was about the time it was depopulated, but the land was still important to the community as part of, continuing extraction, because they got oil royalties into the post-World War II era. So a lot of people continued the extraction even after. So about 1929 is about the case.
In our final 60 seconds we have, why is Blackdom important today when we look back and dissect it? Why is this important that we look at this town at this moment in history and what happened to it?
It shows the intentions of black people. Specifically, in the 20th century, there was this whole point of trying to prove that black people were human. This helps us to easily look back and see how human they were, and look that it wasn't just about surviving out in the desert. It was about thriving, finding place of opportunity and ambition, and looking at black folks as whole human beings. And that's what this book does. It helps you to see throughout time a developed and nurtured consciousness and intellectualism.
The book is titled Blackdom, New Mexico, The Significance of the Afro-Frontier, 1900 to 1930. Dr. Nelson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to Dr. Timothy Nelson for speaking with us about his new book. 1 in 4 New Mexico teens has missed school because they couldn't get period products. That's just one of several statistics the nonprofit Free Flow New Mexico is working to reverse by expanding access to menstrual hygiene for people in the northern part of the state. The organization got its start 3 years ago by distributing menstrual materials, and now has 3 self-serve kiosks in Santa Fe where people can pick up a bag filled with everything they might need. Those kiosks are better known as period pods. Each one has free products available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez recently spoke with the director of Free Flow New Mexico and 3 other people who've been vital in getting one location up and running at the public library branch on Santa Fe's south side.
And I think that'll raise more awareness, because what these are they're like the little libraries that you see in your neighborhoods, but instead of grabbing a book, you're grabbing a bag of period products. Each pod holds 300 bags per month. Each one is funded by a different fabulous foundation or community organization, and they are also pod tended.
And what comes in the pod? Like when someone comes and they get, they take a bag, what's in the bag?
Each bag is filled with a 1-month supply of period products, of pads, tampons, liners. And there's also an offer in each bag which allows the recipient to receive either a period cup, period underwear, and so that it's a reusable item.
When it comes to the period pods, have you had any feedback?
We have been receiving amazing feedback from the period pods. Individuals are so excited to be able to have 24-hour accessibility to period products because your period does not wait for a 9 a.m. opening.
What has been the response for these to be here at the library?
Very, very, very positive. We've gotten a lot of questions, and I think it's really raising awareness because people didn't really think about before how inaccessible these can be sometimes. And how often people are having to make that choice. I think a lot of times people think of that as a problem that happens in other countries, and they don't realize that it's something that happens here in the U.S., every community.
Each pod is designed by local artists from that community.
Anyways.
You'll get to see their beautiful work and what inspires them and what has influenced them.
And why was that important to make sure you found an artist from the community to contribute?
It's important to find an artist from within each community.
My name is Selena Fernandez. I am from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm an artist.
For each community to assist itself.
Hola, mi nombre es Israel Aros, Chicano poet, muralist.
So we have pod tenders, and what those pod tenders are individuals within the community that the pod is located, and they're putting together the bags for their period pod. And they're managing it, and the artists are putting it in. And so we're looking for each community to build itself up and to give within itself.
It's important for us as men to understand that cycle. And it's part of a moon cycle, it's part of a 28-day cycle, it's part of nature. So in this box, I was putting all the different prayers that I've had this much understanding because, again, that's not biologically happening in my body, but it's also part of our spiritual connection. Yeah. We all come from our mothers. We all have to understand those things.
He came in with his masculine energy, I came in with my feminine energy, and that itself was a lesson to be talked about and how important it is for our young people and then like older people to recognize that, yeah, these things are so correlated and that we do need those two energies to keep this balance. I started doing a couple of stuff, which is my style of the Mexica Nahuatl style. A lot of codex do see it here, and I mean, I was trying to center the voice of my community, my Mexican community, and just bring in those remedios and that remedy within my art. And remedies that have been passed on through my communities until it got to me and put them in this box. We have Coatlicue here, who is a goddess and is like Mother Earth, and then we have some Xochitl, which is flower, and the bottom I created my own manzanilla or chamomile, and then from there in the bottom you have a couple of other herbs like salvia, hierba del pollo, dahlia, and ruda, which are all Mexican herbs, herbs that grow in Mexico and that my family has used, generations of their family has used, and people in Mexico continue to use. So that's what I did, and I centered that voice.
In U.S. contemporary times, sometimes we view the period and have really negative connotations to what it is or isn't, and not recognize that it brings life. Irregardless if a woman decides to bring life into this earth, that is part of a life-driving creator cycle. So the different elements that are in here are about creation. So on the top is the Olin and sacred womb design, going back to our ancestral visions. And on the other side has different historical ancestral figures that are associated with the moon, with the feminine, with the serpent energy, with different energies that, again, are part of that feminine cycle. I'm really grateful that they're at the libraries because there's so many things not just with this, that other resources that our Southside families need to have for free.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be nice that, you know, we have all these other different types of resources that are necessities that our community just needs to have.
And what's the importance of having it at two libraries? Because the library is somewhere where people are going. It's a place where the community goes.
Yeah, especially since COVID, the library sort of fell into this role of being a community center. Not that we always kind of were, but we were doing COVID tests, we were helping people get their vaccinations, and we kind of switched our model to where we were looking at what could help the people of Santa Fe the most. And so whether that was access to library materials, information, or in this case, period products, we want to be able to ensure that every person in Santa Fe has access to what they need to be successful, whatever that looks like.
And what are your hopes for more partnerships or anything that you hope that this, between the libraries and Free Flow New Mexico?
Well, we'd love to add one to the main library downtown. And anything that we can do to help raise awareness for this issue, whether it's being part of more campaigns or just being more vocal and posting about it ourselves, and just letting people know that this is an issue and it needs to be addressed.
1 out of 4 low-income menstruators report missing work, school, and other activities. Period products are a basic necessity, and when we supply individuals with their basic necessity, they are able to thrive. We literally have students who have dropped out or have been kicked out of school because of truancy, because they do not have enough period products to supply for their whole cycle, and they end up missing anywhere from 2 to 4 days of school per month, and those build.
And so what is your hope? I know you said you have a big announcement coming up, but what is your hope for ending period poverty, or at least addressing it in the way that your organization is?
Free Flow New Mexico would love to see every individual be able to strive to their personal success, and having their basic necessities taken care of is a way of doing that. Food, shelter, and period products are all bundled in together.
Wait.
Yeah.
Thanks again to Antonia, our crew, and Lori, Margaret, Izzy, and Selena. We have more information about the period pods and where they're located under this story on nmpbs.org. Finally tonight, a federal indictment accuses former Bernalillo County Sheriff Manny Gonzalez and former Laguna Pueblo Police Chief Rudy Mora of assisting in an illegal gun distribution scheme. Gonzalez and Mora haven't been charged, but according to the indictment filed in Maryland, they signed documents authorizing the purchase of more than 1,000 fully automatic weapons that the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives classifies as machine guns. Gonzalez and Mora, who worked under him as Bernalillo County Undersheriff, claimed the guns would be used in law enforcement demonstrations, but federal authorities say that was never their intention. Instead, the two lawmen signed paperwork that allowed Albuquerque gun store owner James Tafoya to buy and then sell those guns, allegedly in violation of federal law. According to the indictment, Gonzalez requested 598 guns from 2015 to 2020, and Mora requested 414 guns from 2020 to 2021. Tafoya is facing charges alleging he illegally imported guns and made false statements. He's already appeared in a Baltimore court where a federal judge released him pending trial. A North Carolina police chief, a North Dakota police chief, a Florida gun dealer, and a North Carolina YouTuber are also charged in the case. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.